China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil. A huge portion of its energy passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and on April 7, 2026, when the entire world tried to reopen that strait, China vetoed the resolution. The biggest victim of the blockade blocked the solution. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't blind loyalty to Iran. That was the smartest strategic move of the entire war. And today, I'm going to show you exactly why. Let's look at the facts. On April 7, 2026, the UN Security Council voted on a resolution originally proposed by Bahrain. The text authorized countries to use, and I quote, all necessary means to ensure freedom of transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Result: 11 countries voted yes. China and Russia vetoed it. Pakistan and Colombia abstained. What the Western media didn't report is what happened before the final vote. The original resolution was aggressive. It authorized the use of military force. Russia, China, and France said it was too extreme. They revised it. They removed all references to offensive military action. China and Russia still vetoed it. They revised it again. They removed any reference to Security Council authorization. China and Russia still vetoed it. 3 versions, each weaker than the last, vetoed on all of them. The U.S. ambassador said that China and Russia chose the side of a regime that seeks to intimidate the Gulf. The British ambassador said that the two countries chose to protect their ally, Iran. That is the Western narrative. But it does not answer the most obvious question. Why would China do that? Here is what the mainstream media is not showing. The resolution, even in its weakest form, would do one very specific thing. It would grant legal legitimacy to the United States and its allies to use military force in the Strait of Hormuz. It would be the UN saying, America, you have the right to control this energy corridor. And here's what that means for China. If America reopens the strait by force, if Iran backs down or is defeated, America proves something of historic consequence, that the American empire, even in decline, still has the muscle to decide who gets energy and who doesn't. And China once again becomes dependent on American goodwill for its oil supply. This has a name in Chinese strategy: the Malacca Dilemma. Beijing's historic fear that Washington could strangle the Chinese economy by controlling maritime routes. Hormuz is the same problem on a different scale. China's veto wasn't about Iran. It was about refusing to let America prove, with the UN's stamp of approval, that it still controls the world's energy. It was China saying it won't help America demonstrate a capability that China has spent decades trying to neutralize. The Western media said that China protected Iran. What China actually did was protect itself. Anyone who follows this channel knows that I always say, never look at what a country says, look at what a country does. And more importantly, ask who benefits from that action. This mechanism is not new. It is the same one that operated in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. In each of these conflicts, America entered with absolute military superiority, obtained or attempted to obtain international legitimacy, and left with a geopolitical order more fragmented than it was before. In Iraq, France and Russia's refusal to support the 2003 invasion was viewed as betrayal by the American establishment. Today, it is seen as one of the few voices that were right. The pattern is always the same. America uses force, seeks retroactive approval from the international community, and the powers that refuse are called obstructionists. The Russian ambassador said in the Security Council that the resolution blamed Iran while completely ignoring what America and Israel did to start this conflict. The Chinese ambassador said the resolution did not address the root causes. They are not wrong. The U.S. and Israel launched military attacks against Iran. They bombed nuclear facilities. They killed Iranian leaders. And then they went to the UN to ask for authorization to use force against the country they attacked because that country was defending itself. Think about the logic. You start the war. Then you ask the international community to authorize the use of force against the country you attacked because it is reacting. This is exactly the logic that the Global South, Asia, Africa, Latin America, has been observing for decades, and the world is tired of it. When China vetoed the resolution, it wasn't just to protect Iran. It was a signal to every country that has ever been on the receiving end of American power. We're not going to give America a legal stamp of approval for this. Here's the layer that no one is discussing. Since 1973, all the world's oil has been traded in US dollars. That was the deal between America and Saudi Arabia. The Saudis sell oil only in dollars. America protects the Saudi regime, and because everyone needs oil, everyone needs dollars. This creates permanent global demand for the U.S. currency. It is what allows America to print money, accumulate massive deficits, and finance its military empire. Without the petrodollar, America cannot be America. Now, what happens when the Strait of Hormuz closes? The Gulf countries cannot export oil. Petrodollars stop circulating. The Gulf states stop recycling dollars back into American financial markets. The entire financial architecture of American power begins to crack. And China is watching this happen, thinking, this is good for us. Because every week that the petrodollar system comes under pressure, the world is pushed to seek alternatives. And the alternatives that exist, oil trade in yuan, the Silk Road payment systems, the Russian-Iranian-Chinese energy corridors, all benefit China. But there's more. China wasn't caught off guard by this blockade. It has been preparing for exactly this scenario for years. Strategic oil reserves. Diversification of suppliers. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which provides access to ports in the Arabian Sea by bypassing Hormuz. The North-South Corridor with Russia and Iran, which creates a land-based energy route. And growing domestic capacity in solar, wind, and nuclear power to reduce dependence on Gulf oil. While the blockade causes short-term pain for China, China is the country best positioned to absorb that pain. America did not prepare. Europe did not prepare. Japan and South Korea, also extremely dependent on Gulf oil, did not prepare. China has borne the short-term pain, but it is the only country with the infrastructure built to withstand it. And every week the crisis continues. The alternatives China has built become more relevant, and the U.S.-controlled maritime system becomes less indispensable. Think about that the next time the price of gas goes up. That extra money you're paying at the pump? Part of it is funding the very transition China has set up to replace the system that makes you pay that price. 3 scenarios for what comes next, each one more serious than the last. In the first, America exhausts its interceptor missiles, domestic political pressure mounts. Only 40% of Americans support this war. And Washington negotiates a reopening of the strait on terms dictated by Iran. China emerges strengthened without having fired a single shot. In the second, the crisis drags on for another 6 to 12 months. The strain on the petrodollar accelerates the adoption of the yuan in energy contracts across the global south. The U.S. financial system begins to show more visible cracks, and April 7, 2026, is rewritten by history as the moment when the U.S. monetary order began to lose its operational legitimacy. In the third, the U.S. decides to act militarily without UN approval. What happens when a nuclear power decides to use force in a region where another nuclear power has declared vital interests? The Pentagon is not commenting publicly on this scenario. And the silence regarding this scenario is, in itself, a statement. Who is consuming resources here? America is spending missiles, political capital, and losing allies willing to bear the economic pain together. Iran is generating more oil revenue than in recent years, and China has its reserves, its alternative routes, its domestic production. The question isn't whether someone will blink first. The question is who blinks first. Let's go back to the beginning. China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil. A huge portion of its energy passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and when the world tried to reopen that strait, China vetoed it. The biggest victim of the blockade blocked the solution. Now you know why. And the question that remains, the question no one in the West is asking out loud, is this. If China calculated all of this with such precision, what else has it calculated that we haven't seen yet? We'll be tracking this every day. If you want to understand what's happening before the mainstream media tells you, sign up here. Because what happens in the coming weeks will depend entirely on which of these 3 scenarios begins to materialize. And when that becomes clear, you'll want to have been following it since today.